The applause began before I even stepped into the gymnasium, and that was exactly why I almost turned around. Rows of folding chairs filled the polished basketball court. Colorful banners hung from the rafters, and a table near the stage held a framed certificate, a polished plaque, and a cake with my name written in careful blue frosting. After 23 years as the custodian at Harrison High School, the faculty had decided I deserved a proper retirement celebration. I had asked Principal Karen Ellis 3 separate times to cancel it. She had smiled kindly every time, promised to keep it simple, and somehow managed to organize an even bigger gathering. I tightened my grip on the old gray metal toolbox that had followed me through every hallway in the building. The paint had long ago chipped away at the corners. The handle was wrapped with faded black tape, and one latch always clicked a fraction of a second later than the other. Most people saw nothing more than an aging maintenance box. One student, however, had been watching it with unusual attention all week. If you have ever wondered whether the quietest person in the room might carry the greatest story, stay with me. Principal Ellis spotted me near the entrance and hurried over with the bright smile she used whenever she believed kindness could solve stubbornness. "Daniel, everyone's ready. Just a few words, then we'll let you enjoy your afternoon." "I appreciate the thought," I said gently, "but I'd still rather skip the speeches. You've spent 23 years taking care of everyone else. Please let us take care of you for 10 minutes. I looked toward the stage and felt the familiar weight settle inside my chest. Recognition had never frightened me because I was shy. It frightened me because every compliment sounded incomplete. As teachers gathered nearby, students filtered into the gym, many of them waving when they saw me. Some remembered the lockers I had repaired before football season. Others remembered the science projects I had quietly helped move after storms flooded classrooms. A few simply remembered that my office door was always open when they needed a place to breathe after a difficult day. Those moments mattered far more than any plaque ever could. While Principal Ellis welcomed everyone, I placed my toolbox beside a folding chair near the front row. The lid shifted slightly as it settled against the floor. Across the aisle, Lily Brooks, a thoughtful senior who edited the yearbook, glanced toward it. She hesitated, as though deciding whether to look away or satisfy her curiosity. Before I could reach the box, the loose lid opened just enough for her to notice what almost no one else ever had. Nestled beside a worn measuring tape rested a carefully folded black and white photograph. Beneath it lay a polished brass nameplate. The name engraved on that plate was not Daniel Mercer. Lily looked up at me, not with suspicion, but with quiet respect. "Mr. Mercer," she asked softly, "whose name is that?" For the first time in 23 years, I wasn't sure whether keeping my promise meant remaining silent. I looked at Lily for several long seconds before answering. Around us, the applause had faded into polite conversations as teachers filled paper plates with cake and students lined up to sign a retirement banner. No one else had noticed the toolbox sitting between us. Instead of closing the lid, I carefully picked up the brass nameplate and brushed my thumb across the worn letters. "His name was Michael Alvarez," I said quietly. Most people called him Mick. Lily didn't reach for the plate or the photograph. She simply waited, and that small act of patience told me more about her character than any question could have. "I've never seen you wear that name," she said. "You weren't supposed to." She nodded without pressing further. "Then why keep it with you every day?" I slipped the nameplate back into the toolbox, but left the photograph where it rested. It showed 2 young Marines standing beside a supply truck, both grinning as though they believed nothing difficult could ever happen to them. One of those young men still looked familiar to me, despite the decades that had passed. The other wore the smile I had spent most of my life trying not to forget. "Mick and I served together," I finally said. "Marine Corps logistics. We weren't heroes. We mostly made sure other people had what they needed." Lily smiled gently. "That sounds important. It was honest work." Across the gym, Principal Ellis began thanking teachers who had helped organize the retirement celebration. Every few moments someone waved in my direction, but I stayed where I was. "I don't understand one thing," Lily admitted. "Everyone here loves you. Why refuse something that's meant to say thank you?" I watched a freshman laughing while trying to balance 3 cups of lemonade without spilling any. "When people clap for me," I answered, "they can't clap for everyone who helped make me the man they're thanking." She considered that for a moment. "My grandfather used to say, gratitude isn't something you divide. It grows." I couldn't help smiling. He sounds like a wise man. He was. For a few quiet moments, neither of us spoke. Then Lily looked toward the photograph again. "Did Mr. Alvarez ever come here?" "No." "Did he want to?" The question settled somewhere deep inside me. "He wanted to spend his life helping young people who felt invisible. Said every school had students everyone overlooked. He believed if one adult noticed them, it could change everything." Lily glanced around the crowded gymnasium. "That sounds like you." I shook my head. It sounded like him first. Just then, Coach Reynolds walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Daniel, remember when you stayed all night fixing the gym after the pipe burst?" He laughed. "The championship game would have been canceled without you." "I remember a lot of people carrying mops." Coach chuckled. "You always do that. Someone compliments you, and somehow everyone else gets the credit." After he wandered away, Lily quietly said, "Maybe that's why people want today to matter." Before I could answer, an elderly woman slowly approached our chairs. It was Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the retired English teacher who had welcomed me on my very first morning at Harrison High 23 years earlier. She smiled warmly when she saw the toolbox. "I haven't seen that old box open in years," she said. Then her expression changed. She wasn't looking at the photograph. She was staring at a small brass classroom key tucked beneath it. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "You still carry room 12's key?" I felt my heart tighten. I had forgotten anyone besides me knew it was there. Mrs. Carter lowered herself into the chair beside mine without waiting for an invitation. She was well into her 80s now, her silver hair neatly pinned back, but her eyes remained as sharp as they had been when she taught generations of students to love literature. "I thought you finally put that key away," she said softly. I closed the toolbox halfway, leaving only enough room to see the worn brass edge of room 12's key. "I almost did." "Almost isn't the same thing." Lily glanced between us, sensing there was history neither of us had explained. "What's special about room 12?" she asked. Mrs. Carter smiled at her before looking back at me, silently asking permission. I gave the smallest nod. "When Daniel arrived here 23 years ago," she began, "the school wasn't in very good shape. We had leaking ceilings, broken lockers, and a classroom nobody used anymore. Room 12 had become a storage room because no one wanted to spend the money fixing it. It wasn't my decision," I added quietly. "No," Mrs. Carter agreed, "but it became your project." Lily leaned forward. You repaired it? Eventually. Mrs. Carter chuckled. He says eventually because he spent nearly 6 months working on it before and after school. Nobody asked him to. Nobody paid him overtime. Every loose hinge, every cracked shelf, every broken desk was repaired one piece at a time. I looked toward the stage where students continued laughing around the cake. There were plenty of people helping. She gave me a knowing smile. There you go again. Lily laughed softly. You really don't like taking credit. I like telling the whole truth. Mrs. Carter folded her hands. When room 12 finally reopened, Daniel didn't ask for recognition. He simply unlocked the door every morning before the first students arrived. Somehow that room became the place children wandered into whenever they needed a quiet moment. Lily's eyes widened. The reflection room? The very one. She looked genuinely surprised. I spent time there after my parents divorced. I thought the counselors created it. They did eventually, Mrs. Carter said. But Daniel kept it welcoming long before anyone gave it a name. The gym suddenly felt much quieter to me. Hundreds of students had passed through that room over the years. Some came because they were grieving, others because they had failed an exam, lost a friend, or simply needed 10 peaceful minutes before facing another difficult day. I never asked many questions. Most of the time, they didn't need answers. They just needed someone to notice they were hurting. Lily looked back at the photograph inside the toolbox. Did Mr. Alvarez know about room 12? I swallowed before answering. He never saw it. But you said it reminded you of him. It reminded me of something he once told me. Before I could continue, Assistant Principal David Nolan approached carrying a stack of printed programs. Daniel, he said cheerfully, we're moving your speech up a little. More parents showed up than we expected. My shoulders stiffened. I really don't have a speech. You'll think of something. After he walked away, Lily noticed the expression on my face. You look like you're about to leave. I've been considering it. Mrs. Carter sighed. You've been running from gratitude for 23 years. I've been protecting something. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into the toolbox with surprising care and lifted the folded photograph only enough to study the smiling young Marine beside me. I remember seeing this once, she whispered. Your first week here. I stared at her. You shouldn't remember that. I remember because you stood alone in room 12 after everyone had gone home. You unfolded that photograph, saluted it, and made a promise out loud. My heartbeat slowed. I had always believed no one had witnessed that moment. Mrs. Carter looked directly into Lily's eyes. I never heard every word, she said gently, but I will never forget the last sentence. She paused. He said, I'll build the classroom you never got to stand inside. For the first time since retirement had been announced, I realized the promise I had spent decades hiding might already have another witness. Mrs. Carter's words lingered in the silence long after she stopped speaking. I rested both hands on the toolbox, feeling every dent in the old metal, as if each one marked another year I had spent trying to keep a promise that was never supposed to become a story. Lily broke the silence first. You built room 12 for him. I slowly shook my head. I built it because I couldn't build the future he lost. Neither of them interrupted. That was a gift. When Mick and I were 22, I said, we spent a long night unloading supplies after everyone else had gone to sleep. We talked about what we'd do after the Marines. I imagined opening a small repair shop somewhere quiet. Mick laughed and said he wanted to work in a school. Lily smiled. A school? He said teenagers carried burdens adults rarely noticed. He believed one dependable person could change the direction of a young life simply by showing up every day. I looked across the gymnasium at dozens of students laughing together. Back then, I thought he was dreaming too small. And now? Lily asked. I think I was, Mrs. Carter quietly reached into her purse and removed a folded envelope that had yellowed with age. I've kept this because I always thought you'd ask for it one day. She handed it to me. My name was written across the front in Mick's unmistakable handwriting. I closed my eyes for a moment before carefully opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The ink had faded, but every word remained clear. Danny, if I ever miss my chance, promise me one thing. Find a place where young people still believe tomorrow can be better than today. Fix what breaks. Notice the ones everyone overlooks. Don't do it because of me. Do it because somebody once did it for us. The gymnasium disappeared around me. For years, I had remembered those words from memory, yet seeing them again made them feel new. Lily quietly wiped a tear from her cheek. So, the toolbox, she whispered. It reminds me why I came to work every morning. Mrs. Carter nodded. And why you never wanted applause. Before I could answer, Principal Ellis approached, carrying the retirement plaque. Daniel, she said gently, everyone's waiting. We'd really like to begin. I looked from the plaque to the letter still resting in my hands. I can't accept that. You haven't even heard what we're saying. That's exactly why. She frowned, confused rather than offended. You've given this school 23 years. I gave this school what one friend asked me to give. Principal Ellis glanced at the photograph, then at the brass nameplate. I don't understand. You will, Mrs. Carter answered softly, but not through a speech. For the first time, Principal Ellis sat down instead of trying to persuade me. What am I missing? I carefully placed the letter beside the photograph. The man whose name is on that brass plate never got the chance to stand inside a classroom after leaving the Marines. Every locker I repaired, every light bulb I changed, every desk I fixed. I paused, searching for words that had never seemed necessary before. They were my way of making sure his dream kept breathing. The principal's eyes filled with quiet emotion. Daniel, why didn't you ever tell anyone? Because the promise wasn't made to everyone. Lily looked at me with a calm certainty that surprised me. But maybe it was meant for everyone, eventually. Her words settled over all of us. At that moment, I realized something I had refused to consider for 23 years. Keeping a promise and hiding it were not necessarily the same thing. Before any of us could speak again, Assistant Principal Nolan hurried across the gym with obvious concern. Karen, he said, the school board president just arrived early. They brought a special Lifetime Achievement Award we never planned. I quietly closed the toolbox. No, I said, rising from my chair. If they're here for me, I won't be. I picked up the toolbox and turned toward the side exit. Behind me, Lily called my name, but I kept walking. For the first time since I had unlocked room 12 all those years ago, I believed leaving might be the only way to protect the promise that had shaped my entire life. The afternoon air felt cooler the moment I stepped outside the gymnasium. The sounds of applause disappeared behind the heavy doors, replaced by the familiar hum of sprinklers watering the football field. I carried the toolbox across the empty courtyard, the same way I had carried it thousands of mornings before. Except this time, every step felt heavier. I reached room 12 and unlocked the old brass door with the key I had refused to leave behind. The room looked exactly as it always had. Sunlight spilled across neatly arranged desks. A bookshelf stood against the back wall, filled with donated novels and worn paperbacks. 2 comfortable chairs faced a window overlooking the courtyard. On one wall hung handwritten notes from former students thanking anonymous teachers, counselors, and staff members who had simply listened when life became difficult. None of the notes mentioned my name. That was exactly how I had wanted it. I placed the toolbox on the small workbench beneath the window and slowly opened it again. Mick's photograph rested beside the folded letter, as though they had never moved. I almost made it, I whispered to the smiling face beside mine. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. I already knew who it would be. Come in. Lily stepped inside, followed by Principal Ellis. Neither of them spoke until the door quietly closed behind them. I figured this was where you'd go, Lily said. This room always finds people who need it. Principal Ellis looked around carefully. I've worked here for 11 years, she admitted. I never realized how much of this room came from you. It came from a lot of volunteers. She smiled sadly. And there you go again. For a moment, the 3 of us simply stood together in silence. Then Principal Ellis placed the Lifetime Achievement plaque on one of the desks. I didn't bring this because I want you to accept it. I looked at her with surprise. I brought it because the school board doesn't understand why you're gone. She sat down across from me. They think you're embarrassed. They're wrong. I know. She took a slow breath before continuing. They also don't know that every year you've quietly used your own retirement savings to buy winter coats, backpacks, calculators, and bus passes for students who couldn't afford them. Lily turned toward me in complete disbelief. You... What? I looked away. It wasn't much. It was enough, Principal Ellis replied. The financial office keeps records. You never asked anyone to know where the money came from. I wasn't buying recognition. I know. The room became painfully quiet. Lily slowly walked to the bulletin board and studied dozens of handwritten thank you notes. One in particular caught her attention. To whoever fixed my locker before my first day back after chemo, thank you for making me feel normal again. Another read, the reflection room gave me somewhere to breathe when my brother died. Then another. Someone left groceries on our porch 3 winters in a row. I still don't know who. Lily turned around. These weren't separate acts of kindness. I didn't answer. They were all part of the same promise. My silence answered for Maui. Principal Ellis reached into her folder and removed another document. I wasn't looking for this, she said. Mrs. Carter asked the archives volunteer to help us find your hiring paperwork. She handed me the faded employment application. Attached to it was a handwritten note from the former superintendent. Applicant requests assignment near students rather than district maintenance. Says he prefers repairing places where young people gather. I had forgotten writing those words. Lily smiled through tears. You came here because of Mick. I came because of a promise. She gently touched the edge of the toolbox. Do you think he'd be disappointed if people finally knew? The question landed harder than any speech could have. For years, I had convinced myself that silence honored my friend. Now I wasn't so certain. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated for the first time all afternoon. It was Coach Reynolds. When I answered, I heard unexpected excitement in his voice. "Daniel, you need to know something. What happened?" "The ceremony didn't end." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "No one would let Principal Ellis cancel it." My stomach tightened. "They're not waiting for an award anymore." I looked toward the window overlooking the courtyard. Students, teachers, retired staff members, and even parents were quietly walking away from the gym. Not toward the parking lot. They were coming toward room 12. None of them carried balloons. None of them carried plaques. They carried photographs. Within minutes, the hallway outside room 12 filled with quiet footsteps. No one spoke loudly. No one applauded. It felt less like a ceremony and more like people instinctively gathering around something they suddenly understood was sacred. I stood beside the open toolbox while Lily looked through the narrow window in the classroom door. "They're just waiting," she whispered. Principal Ellis stepped into the hallway, returning a moment later with tears in her eyes. "They're holding photographs." "Of what?" "Of themselves." I frowned. She nodded slowly. "They've been passing phones around in the gym. Former students started sending pictures. Then current students joined them. Parents found old graduation photos. Teachers pulled class pictures from the yearbooks." I still didn't understand. "They all have one thing in common," she continued. "Every photograph was taken inside this room, or somewhere you quietly helped them." Before I could respond, there was another gentle knock. Mrs. Carter opened the door. "Daniel, may they come in? I don't want this to become an award." "It won't." She smiled. "It already became something else." I took a long breath before answering. "All right." The first person through the doorway surprised me. A woman in her early 30s carried a framed high school graduation picture. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "I remember everyone, eventually." She laughed through tears. "My name is Emily Foster. My mother died during my junior year." Of course I remembered. She had spent nearly every lunch period sitting quietly beside the window in room 12. "You fixed my backpack zipper every Monday because I kept pretending it wasn't broken," she said. "I remember the backpack. I thought you didn't notice I was falling apart." "I noticed. You never asked questions. I figured you'd answer them when you were ready." Emily smiled. "You saved my dignity." She placed her graduation photograph beside the toolbox. Another former student stepped forward, then another. One had become a firefighter. Another was a pediatric nurse. One now taught middle school history. Each carried a photograph. Each told a story that I had almost forgotten. None of them thanked me for repairing buildings. They thanked me for seeing them. As the line continued, Lily quietly arranged the photographs across the tables in room 12 until the classroom slowly transformed into a timeline of lives. Then Coach Reynolds entered carrying something unexpected. A faded group photograph from 23 years earlier. Every member of the maintenance crew stood together outside Harrison High. I was in the back row holding the toolbox. The brass nameplate was already attached to the inside of its lid. Coach pointed toward it. You never hid it from us." I looked closer. He was right. It had been there all along. "We all assumed it belonged to a family member," he said. "We never asked." Mrs. Carter smiled. "Because Daniel never invited attention." Principal Ellis slowly opened the folded letter from Mick once more. "I think people deserve to hear this." I instinctively reached toward the paper, then stopped. For years, I had believed those words belonged only to me. Now I wondered whether keeping them hidden had accidentally hidden Mick as well. Was silence still protecting him, or preventing others from learning from him? The question stayed with me as another visitor approached the doorway. This time it was someone I had never expected to see again. A tall man with silver hair paused before entering. His Marine Corps lapel pin caught the afternoon light. He looked at the photograph inside my toolbox for only a second before whispering one name. Mick. I stared at him. He slowly removed an old leather wallet from his coat pocket. Inside was another photograph taken on the same day as mine, except this copy showed 4 Marines instead of 2. "My name is Thomas Green," he said quietly. "I served with both of you." The room became completely silent. Thomas looked directly at me. "I've spent 23 years trying to find the man who kept Michael Alvarez's promise." No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time since Mick's letter had been written, someone else had arrived carrying a piece of the same unfinished story. Thomas Green stepped fully into room 12 and removed his Marine Corps cap. No one hurried him. The silence itself seemed to recognize that he had carried something important for a very long time. He looked at me with tired eyes that had aged the same way mine had. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," he said. "I wasn't sure anyone else remembered. I never forgot." He reached into his wallet again and unfolded a brittle piece of paper that had been creased so many times it looked ready to fall apart. It wasn't another letter. It was a list of 4 names written in Mick's handwriting. Mine was first. Thomas's was second. The remaining 2 Marines had each been assigned a simple promise. One was to look after Mick's younger sister until she finished college. Another was to return a family Bible to his parents. Beside my name were only 7 words. "Build the place I never reached." Thomas smiled sadly. "You were the only one who actually finished your promise." I shook my head. "No, I just kept walking longer." He looked around the classroom. "I visited Mick's parents every year until they passed away. I always wondered whether I should tell them about you." "Why didn't you?" "Because they told me something I'll never forget." He paused before continuing. "They said, 'If Daniel is keeping his promise, don't interrupt him. Someday we'll know by the lives he changes.'" The room fell silent again. I had spent decades believing I failed Mick's family by never visiting them. Instead, they had quietly chosen to trust me. Principal Ellis wiped her eyes before standing. "I understand now." She picked up the Lifetime Achievement plaque, turned it over, and quietly removed the engraved brass plate from its wooden base. Everyone watched without speaking. She placed the blank plaque back on the desk. "This never belonged to one person." Assistant Principal Nolan stepped into the doorway. "The school board is asking if we're ready." Principal Ellis calmly shook her head. "Not yet. They've already prepared the presentation. Then they'll prepare another." For the first time all afternoon, Nolan looked genuinely uncertain. They may not like changing the program. Principal Ellis met his eyes without hesitation. Then they can decide whether they're honoring appearances or honoring the truth. He stood quietly for several seconds. Then, without another word, he nodded and walked away. Watching him leave, I realized something unexpected. No one was fighting over recognition anymore. They were protecting the promise. Lily gathered the photographs covering the tables and carefully carried them toward the gymnasium. "Would you help me?" she asked. "With what?" "Showing everyone who the promise really belonged to." I looked at Mick's photograph. "I don't know if I can stand on that stage." "You don't have to." Thomas rested a weathered hand on my shoulder. "You stood where it mattered for 23 years. A few minutes later, we walked back into the gym together. The applause began again, before quickly fading into complete silence. The school board president stepped toward the microphone. Before he could speak, Principal Ellis quietly asked for the plaque. She removed the engraved plate everyone had expected to see. Then she held up Mick's brass nameplate from my toolbox. "The recognition we planned today," she said, "was incomplete." She gently placed Mick's name beside the blank plaque. "Today, we honor a promise shared between two Marines." Gasps spread through the audience as Lily projected photographs from room 12 across the large screen. Not photographs of me. Photographs of hundreds of former students whose lives had quietly crossed paths with one ordinary custodian. Emily. The firefighter. The nurse. The teacher. Children who had once believed no one noticed them. Thomas then stepped to the microphone. "I served with Michael Alvarez and Daniel Mercer," he said. "One dreamed of helping young people. The other refused to let that dream die." He looked toward me. "Daniel, your promise was never meant to stay hidden forever." I slowly opened the old toolbox one final time. Inside rested the photograph, the letter, the classroom key, and the brass nameplate. I carefully lifted the nameplate and placed it beside the blank award. "I accept nothing for myself," I said quietly. "But if this school is willing, let every student who walks through these doors remember Michael Alvarez." The audience rose to its feet. No one cheered. Instead, hundreds of people stood together in respectful silence. For the first time in 23 years, I no longer felt alone in carrying the promise. The following Monday morning, I unlocked room 12 one last time. The classroom felt exactly as it always had. Sunlight rested across the old wooden desks. The donated books still leaned unevenly against one another on the shelves. Outside the window, students hurried between classes with the same nervous energy I had watched for more than 2 decades. For the first time in 23 years, I wasn't carrying the toolbox. It sat inside a glass display case just outside the room. The photograph of Mick. The folded letter. The brass nameplate. The worn classroom key. None of them were labeled as relics. Instead, a simple bronze plaque beneath the case read, "A promise kept through ordinary acts of service." No names appeared larger than the others. That mattered to me. Principal Ellis joined me in the doorway. "The school board voted unanimously," she said with a warm smile. "Beginning this year, the Michael Alvarez and Daniel Mercer Quiet Service Award will recognize one student each spring who helps others without asking for recognition." I quietly nodded. I think Mick would have liked that. I think he already does. Moments later, Lily walked in carrying a small wooden shadow box. I have something for you. Inside rested the brass key to room 12. I looked at her in surprise. I thought it belonged here. It does, she replied gently. This is a new one. We had a copy made. The original stays with the exhibit. We hoped you'd keep this one. I turned the key over in my hand. Its polished edges caught the morning light, but it carried the same shape as the worn original that had opened this room thousands of times. It isn't a reminder of the past, Lily said. It's a reminder that promises don't retire. Before leaving, I walked through the classroom one final time, straightening a chair that didn't really need straightening. Old habits are hard to leave behind. As I reached the doorway, I looked back once more. Students had already begun entering before school officially opened. One young freshman held the door for another who looked frightened and alone. Neither of them noticed me watching. They simply smiled and walked inside together. At that moment, I realized the promise no longer belonged to me. It had quietly become part of the school's character. If this story reminded you that the greatest acts of service are often the ones no one applauds, I hope you'll carry that thought into someone's life today. May you never underestimate the quiet strength of keeping your word, the lasting power of simple kindness, or the unseen legacy one faithful heart can leave behind. God bless you, and may honor continue to live through the ordinary choices we make every single day.